All right.
So let's start off. Where were you born and raised?
Where was I born and raised? I was born in Hillsdale, Michigan, and raised there.
During the Korean War, did you know anybody in it?
Sorry to disappoint you, but I was not alive during the Korean War. Right? Wasn't born yet.
So,
Believe it or not, I look older than that, but I really wasn't born yet.
do you know anybody before you were born that was impacted from it?
Oh yeah, oh yeah, lot of people. Nobody in my family. Well, I have a father-in-law that was in the Korean War. He was on the Great Incheon Landing, and quite an assault because it had to be a seaborne invasion. It had to go in on low tide. It was expected not to go well, but they made it. And he had a friend that he's talked about, a really good friend. But once they were on the same boat that went ashore, but once they went ashore, he never saw him again. Doesn't even know what happened to him.
And what about the Vietnam War? Because that was a long war.
Well, the Vietnam War ended when I was in high school in '73. So, yeah, I knew a lot of people in the Vietnam War. I can remember when the U.S. Turner Joy supposedly was attacked. I can remember that being a young kid on vacation at a lake. I remember that happening. That's getting involved in that after the French assault at Dien Bien Phu brought us basically into the war. Okay, but eventually Kennedy started putting in some advisors, and then of course Kennedy got assassinated, and then it became Lyndon Johnson's war.
Did you feel any type of way towards the war?
Well, it was a tough time being in school because there were a lot of nice kids, I'm sure, that I would have probably been real good friends with. But because you had to take a stance, there was no sitting on the fence. You either had to be for the war or against the war. And of course, I'm a very patriotic American, so I was supporting the war because that's the way I was raised. But there were a lot of kids I knew that were against the war. And eventually those kids became known as the hippies and also the druggies. And but I mean, there were probably druggies and kids I knew that. But it was really weird. You didn't. It's kind of sad because I know there's nice people over there, but they didn't want to talk to you because of what your stance, and of course, you know, you didn't talk with them associated because you hung around with kids that had the same ideals that you did. And sports was the same way, you know, because the kids that played the sports were the good kids, and the kids that didn't play sports were the kids that were always in trouble. So I tried to disconnect myself from that because I was a very sports-oriented and focused student.
If the war had kept going, would you have joined?
I could have been drafted, especially if I failed out of school. I was fortunate I was going on to college anyways, so it probably would have kept me out of the draft. But if I had failed college and flunked out, I could have been drafted late if it had proceeded from the years that I went to school. Yeah.
Did you feel any type of way towards the draft? Like, did you think it was wrong, or were you?
Well, the trouble with the draft is you got people that don't want to go, and I guess that's a very difficult challenge for the military. Just like in anything, if you don't have people that want to do it and their heart and soul's not in it, or they don't believe in it, it's not going to do anything. You're going to put other people at danger. So the way they probably got the military today, which is all volunteer, is probably the best way to go. But in case of a real war, you don't really have a choice. You're going whether you like it or not. And you got to win because if you don't, you lose your freedom. So, but hopefully we'll never be in that situation again.
During the Civil Rights era, how was life during that time?
How was it?
Yeah, like.
Well, I came from an all-white town, and didn't remember. The only thing is, my dad was a coach at a Hillsdale College, and they did have black athletes. And the thing that I take great pride in is 9 years before the before the civil rights movement actually took place, my father was already integrating black athletes into his college, and a lot of the boys were there, and my dad often many times would have football games where people would not serve his team because they had black athletes, and my dad wouldn't put up with that stuff. As a matter of fact, my dad had a really fine football team, won 34 games in a row over 4 years, and they were selected to go to a bowl game, and were told that they couldn't bring their black athletes. So fortunately for the president of the college and my dad said, we're not going because you're not taking our black athletes. And the other thing was the players, the white players, they said, hey, we're not playing without those guys because it's a team, you know.
Yeah.
So I'm real proud about that because there's a lot of things that happened at that time, and it's really tough because you're in an all-white town. People are always probably, you know, looking, going, what's going on here? But my parents, you know, didn't care about that. They did what they felt was right.
Did you ever encounter any civil rights movement?
Well, I mean, I was probably a young boy. I mean, you're probably 10 or something like that. You know, it really didn't affect me that way. I mean, I never really thought of it that way because I knew that there would be athletes that I knew at the college that were black, or they'd come to our house and something that was normal for me. So I mean, I didn't look at it that way as a, you know, a difference in people.
If you can recall, other than African Americans, did you see other races being discriminated too, as much?
Not really. I mean, it's like I said, when I was a young kid, it was all white town, and I mean, to see Indians was very rare. I mean, even Native American Indians was very rare. Yeah, but no, I didn't really notice that much.
And for the assassination of John F. Kennedy, do you recall the moment?
Sure do. I was in 3rd grade, and we had a teacher by the name of Mrs. Fitch, and she came into the classroom crying, and I'll never forget this kid, Reed Gelzer, who had a hardware, his dad owned a hardware store, Gelzer Hardware in the town, and he goes, he says, what happened, you leave the bathtub running? Like that. It was, you know, a dumb thing in 3rd grade, but she sat in a chair, and we're all still wondering at our desktop when she finally told us that the president had been assassinated. And then I remember how stunned we all were, but I remember it was a rainy day, a dark overcast rain, and it was on a Friday. And I remember from that announcement, a few minutes later, a little bit of time later, we went into the 4th grade class, Mrs. Goldsmith's class, and that's where I heard Walter Cronkite become very emotional from CBS News and say that the president was dead. And he said, we're going to go to a commercial. And the funny thing about it was the commercial had a advertisement for Gelzer Hardware, the kid that said, would you leave the bathtub running? And I'll never forget that because he said, yeah, started screaming, yeah, Gelzer's, you know, kind of weird, but it was a solemn moment because of the death of President Kennedy. But like I said, I was really young, but it was the first time I'd ever experienced that.
Did anybody feel some type of way towards the death of Martin Luther King?
That what happened at night, and I was actually with my brother and I. We were alone with the babysitter, and we were playing football in the living room. And I remember when the special news came on TV, it was a bulletin, and said that had happened. How shocking it was, but I mean, yeah, it still, I was a young kid.
Were riots or any outbreaks because of that happening?
Yes, in Detroit there was a riot, and I'll never forget this. There was a mirror that my mother had gotten from my great-grandmother. My great-grandmother was born in 1880, and when she got married, she had this huge mirror. Oh wait, well, when my grandmother died, my mother had sent it to Detroit to be refurbished, and it was right in the midst of the riots. That's where it was, and we thought it had burned down because we heard that the place had burned down. But little known, about 3 months after the riots, we had our mirror sent back to us, and so I've got it in my house today. So that keeps a reminder of the civil rights or the riots of those times.
How did your family feel when Robert F. Kennedy was killed also?
Well, Robert F. Kennedy, he was running for president. I remember, I think I was in 7th grade, and he was in California. And I remember the great defensive lineman from the Rams, Rosie Greer, who actually took down Sirhan Sirhan. And I remember all that because that was important to me because I really admired Rosie Greer, who was a great football player, but he was a knitter. He was, he used to do the threading and stuff. But yeah, that was quite a moment because that's the second Kennedy that everybody had known that had been assassinated.
With these three murders, do you recall anyone or yourself worried about the sake of freedom of the First Amendment due to the crime towards political figures?
No, I don't think so. I think I never worried about that at that time because I think America was so patriotic, far much more patriotic at that time than maybe the way people act today. It doesn't mean that people don't have that patriotism. It's just that there's a lot of people that may not be thinking what's best for our country right now.
And growing up, for the space exploration, did you ever fantasize about space?
Oh, sure. I remember the biggest thing I remember was John Glenn orbiting the Earth three times that day, and walking home and thinking about John Glenn, how he had gotten around the Earth, because I thought that was amazing. Of course, the Russians, Yuri Gagarin was there first, but John Glenn was our first one that orbited 3 times, and that was really special.
Was the first exploration, I bet, was such an exciting thing to like look forward to, like, for more.
Well, I mean, I'll probably remember more about the, landing on the moon with Neil Armstrong. But I remember John Glenn's my first real experience with, because that was an American that went into space.
So the first man walking on the moon was a very memorable day for you. And
right, that was in July of '69, I believe. That was Neil Armstrong. And I remember we were on a dad's boat going down Indian River in Michigan, lower Michigan, and we left there, I would say probably about 11 o'clock. We got back to my grandparents' cottage and we watched the news with the guys on the moon, CBS News, watching all of the space coverage of the guys being, on television, watching them do things on the moon.
And overall, coming to the present, what is one thing you wish young people today wouldn't take for granted?
About the president or what?
Or just anything like.
Well, I would say that the cost of freedom is high, and if you like what you can do in this country, you better be ready to defend it. And I just think that we have to be united. Whoever our president is, that's the way it is, and we cannot go our separate way. We have to be united under one president, and then wrong or right, that's why you hold elections, and we've got to do what we got to do with whoever that president is, whether you voted for him or not, and we got to stay united.
Do you think times were better back then or now?
Like I said, Vietnam War was a very troubling time because there was a lot of division. I mean, where you just didn't have friends, and I don't know, I'd maybe see this today with our president right now, President Trump. But I think it's not like the Vietnam War. It's more like, I think it's more of news media type effects. Okay.
So what's one thing you can say that you miss about back then?
What do I miss about them? Oh, what do I miss about being young like that and being able to do the things that I used to do that I wish I could do today and I can't. And basically my health, I mean, I'm in good health now, but I don't have the ability to run as fast as I used to or have the stamina to stay up all night or something like that, just ability to go out and really have fun,
All right, that concludes my question.
Okay, and this is for Mr. Lee?
Yes.
Right there. Sean Lee, right there. Okay.
Thank you.
You got it.